Well, Brandon, how did you enjoy the infomercial for Raw on Netflix and Saturday night's main event? I'm thinking USA Network's wondering, what did we pay for? They should be paying us.
Don't forget the extended preview for Mufasa the Lion King.
Yes. Yeah, it really, I mean, I was computing in my head like, okay, the final segment on SmackDown is a build-up for, and I mean, obviously this happens on Peacock, but Peacock's a partner of USA and NBC Universal. They haven't always, been unified in all their cross promotions because obviously when SmackDown was on Fox, there was cross promotion between those shows and stuff. So it's not a new thing. But man, I was thinking, did they give enough to USA isn't paying micro attention to this kind of thing. But if viewership is down and they look at what they did and it was like, yeah, we had semifinals of a tournament, but that was set up finals for NBC. Saturday night's main event. I mean, obviously, USA Network's fine with it. It's the Netflix stuff that feels a little bit more, what's going on here, But I'm obviously USA Network doesn't care about the SNME plug and are all for it. And frankly, since most of the hype, I mean, I'm giving them a hard time because it felt like an infomercial, but most of the hype was for an NBC partner or NBC itself. But man, they're making a big deal out of Netflix. And they ought to. I mean, obviously, you want that to be a big deal. Top story coming out of that, we'll just shift to that, is the Roman Reigns Solo Sikoa tribal. What is it? Tribal combat match for the Ufafala, as LA Knight I think called it, the Ulafala. So what do you make of that? We now have something that we know for that premiere on Netflix.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't officially confirm it. Solo has to accept the challenge, I guess, which they sort of made it appear as though he was going to do that at that online press conference that they're doing on Wednesday at headquarters.
Yep.
They specifically highlighted that Solo was going to be there, so I assume that's when he accepts the challenge. But it feels like a big match. I mean, that felt sort of like, obviously it was the next step. I think we all knew that was where this was headed, was a one-on-one match between Solo Sikoa and Roman Reigns. I thought that it might be saved for pay-per-view or a premium live event. Would have made sense as one of the marquee matches for the Royal Rumble that wasn't a Rumble match. But instead they're going to do it on Netflix, which, I mean, hey, you need a big match for that debut. It's a little bit strange in the sense that, it seems like for at least the premiere on Netflix, they're throwing the brand split out the window. I mean, that is two SmackDown wrestlers competing on Raw. But it does appear as though they are just kind of going to go all hands on deck for the first Raw, at least, which makes sense.
Yeah, and it's not going to be the only big match, but I think they had to start announcing some things. Yeah. And I mean, to me, Roman against Jacob Fatu feels like a bigger match. Roman and Solo, with all due respect to Solo, I mean, he did say last week, no one's taking me seriously. I mean, you don't say that if people are taking you seriously. It feels like a match that they can afford to give away and not save for like WrestleMania. And it's not to diminish the match. It just doesn't feel like, what are they thinking? It is an attraction, but they're still advertising ticket sales for that show. Obviously they want to sell out. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'll jump in with a chat comment here. Sean from Tennessee, John Plichka says, there's no way there can be a finish in that match, which is a little frustrating. Do you agree with that, or can there be a finish?
I think there can. I think it really depends on how focused they are on pushing Solo Sikoa going forward. I mean, you alluded to the fact that Jacob Fatu seems like the bigger match, and I agree. So is this a way to move Jacob Fatu into the forefront and let Solo take a step back? If it is, then yeah, you can have Roman Reigns go over. But if the plan here is to extend the story that they're telling with Roman and Solo being, the respective heads of their tables, then no, probably not. You probably don't get a finish, or you get Solo going over in some sort of dirty fashion.
And it's the Paul Levesque booking era, which it's an absence of a lot of irritants, but he's introduced one new irritant, which is a lot of cop-out finishes in big matches. And so certainly, there's reason to believe that could be the case. Although Sadler version 3 says Roman winning clean is the most likely outcome, in my opinion. And I certainly don't rule that out. Yeah, I mean, I could see. I mean, it's Paul Levesque. I could see them doing a cop out finish, especially if they can. If they deliver a good match and then an angle that they think is a big deal that sets up either a rematch or something with Jacob Fatu or an injury to Roman, there might be some sort of injury angle if they gang attack him and whatever. I mean, they have a whole array of things that they can do, and it depends on Roman's schedule, the pace of booking, what they're going to do with the Rumble, what they're going to do with the next Saturday night's main event. We had LA Knight, Andrade, and Apollo Crews getting laid out. Are we getting Solo and Tonga and Fatu against those three on SmackDown as sort of a B-level main event I don't know. What do you think? Where's that heading?
Kind of feels like it. I mean, when they laid out Apollo Crews, I think it was last week, I didn't really think much of it. I thought they just, they needed a recognizable babyface wrestler for them to beat up backstage. I didn't necessarily think that anything would come of it, but I mean, if they're shuffling talent around and they want to get some new faces on TV regularly, then you can go back to that well with Apollo Crews. Andrade has certainly been very underutilized in terms of main roster TV time. So I don't dislike that. It doesn't feel like a huge match by any means, but it certainly works for a TV main event.
Yep. What you think of LA Knight? It was interesting. LA Knight saying, I don't want to be involved in anyone else's business, which was sort of, I was setting him up for a 3-on-1 attack with nobody coming to his aid, but he did have some people come to his aid. And so they were able to set up the 6-man. But at first I was like, LA Knight, you just talked yourself into a bad situation. If you're not going to help anyone else out, no one's going to help you out. Didn't turn out to be true. LA Knight making fun of the Ulafala, as I alluded to at the top of the show here. Did they do enough for LA Knight where you feel like, because they didn't bury him, they didn't pin him, it was a DQ. It seems like they're still protecting him even after losing the U.S. title. And he's got two things going on. I assume he's going to want more revenge against the Bloodline. I'm glad he attempted to get revenge on the Bloodline and then just pivot to something else entirely, because that would have, been a bad look for him. But he's also got Nakamura saying, you were never U.S. champion for real. It was my destiny to be it, and disparaged him. So they've got LA Knight busy. For people who thought he was going to be buried last week, or that he'd be buried after last week, that's not the case. I think, to answer my own question, but I'll throw it to you, I thought they did a pretty decent job keeping LA Knight at the same level despite losing to Nakamura.
Yeah, I think they've done a good job. I think he is still, the reactions to him when he comes out have subsided a little bit, but the crowd is still really into the yeah chant. He still feels like a star. He still feels like he is in the upper echelon of guys on SmackDown, and you could tell that they were using him in that role tonight because they were so light on talent that they had, babyface talent that they had wrestling. So LA Knight was kind of the anchor for tonight's show, and I thought it worked fine, even though they didn't deliver a finish there. I thought they protected Knight, and that was clearly part of the motive. I mean, with how hard of an act the Bloodline act has been pushed, the new Bloodline in particular, it would have been very easy to see Solo going over there and even going over clean. But not only did they take it a step further by not having Solo win, but to end the match in a DQ. As much as I don't like non-finishes, I think that it works here in the sense that Knight needed a little bit after losing to Nakamura, and he does feel like he has multiple places that he slots in right now, which I think is a good thing because it gives him multiple directions, multiple ways that you can take it. AEW does this a lot where they have their talent working multiple angles at once, and sometimes it's not as clearly defined as I think what they have done here with LA Knight. So I'm all for, people being involved in multiple conflicts and being pulled in multiple directions. When AEW does it well, I think it works really well. And I think WWE is doing a pretty good job of it here.
Glenn B in the chat says LA Knight is a main event guy in the eyes of the fans, at least those in the arena. It's always near the top of the card and has been JN. What is that short for? Or is that a typo? With both tribal chiefs. How many have done that? LA Knight is not a main eventer, and but he gets really good reactions. I mean, you can get really good reactions that are akin to main event reactions, but I don't think I would venture to say the fans don't see him as a main eventer. I think they see him as a U.S. title level guy, and they're totally okay with it. There's no shame in that. That's a nice job to have. It's a nice place to be. But I don't know. I mean, I'm a little surprised. I guess losing the U.S. title and then losing to Solo, would be tough to. I would say tough to come back from because he's so good at talking and the fans like him. But it would have been a double blow, and it would have taken some work to kind of change the perception that, his best days are behind him. So in that sense, I sort of get it. The visual of Jacob was cool. Maybe a little contrived, but it was cool. But yeah, I mean, what do you think? Do you think fans see him as a main eventer and want him to be in the main event spot? I mean, it's a busy, crowded top tier. Or do you think they like him, but they see him for, a second tier guy?
I think he's a guy that could visit if they needed it in a pinch. I think that, like we were just talking about the idea of a 6-man in the next couple of weeks on SmackDown. And I think that the fans will buy that as a main event for a SmackDown show. If you put LA Knight and a couple partners against the new Bloodline, I think that's fine. I think that he can main event TV when the situation calls for it. And if at some point you have a really dominant heel champion, I could see him rising to that level as like a B pay-per-view type challenger. And I think the fans would buy that. But I don't get the sense that they're clamoring to see him in the main event spot. I don't see that it's the way that the fans were sort of adamant about seeing LA Knight get a push. They're not adamant in the same way about seeing him be in the main events.
Yep. I think that's fair. Ken Arnold says LA Knight is a solid upper mid-card guy. Sometimes you can have him in the main event of a typical SmackDown or Raw, a semi-main event of a B-level PLE, but not headlining. And I don't even know what's missing from him because there's a lot he has going for him. But, 4-star matches as something you can count on with him is probably one of them. And there's a little bit about his act that's one note. It's a great note for crowd reactions, and it served him well. It's gotten where he is. Again, there's no shame in kind of having a voice that people know and a rhythm and kind of a cadence to his promos that totally works with catchphrases and all that. He's got that mastered, and it's top tier stuff for what it is. But yeah, he's not a main guy. But let's see what Standard Deviation said. WWE started pushing a new main event star last week, but it wasn't LA Knight. He just wasn't on tonight's show. And where was Doc Gallows? All right, well, let's Sadler version 3 says LA Knight feels like an upper main event, semi-main eventer, kind of like KO and Sami Zayn level. Could be a main event title contender, but I don't see him winning it unless there's a rash of injuries to top guys. I think that's fair. I mean, it sounds like a cheap shot, but it's also a pat on the back. David Hager says at least he didn't fall off the ropes. Did he have a botch-free match with Solo?
I think so.
Yeah.
I didn't notice anything.
Yeah, so good. I mean, I was like, maybe I missed it. I felt like I must have missed it because it always happens. But, Derek Mitchell chimes in. It's okay. LA Knight hovers around upper mid-card. Not everyone is going to be a main eventer. He's getting solid reaction from the crowd. Reminds you of Mr. Kennedy before the wheels fell off. That's actually a really apt comparison.
Yeah.
Mr. Kennedy for sure. Yep. And Junaid joined us, and we'll go full circle here, and then we'll go into introductions. Junaid says, this whole SmackDown fight felt like a commercial for Raw and Netflix inside its main event, and forwarded key stories and was very good, I thought. Junaid, I don't know if you're here at the very top of the show, but that's what I led with. It did feel like an infomercial. So, as they say, great minds think alike. Okay, let's pause and introduce ourselves and then move on to other topics. We got a super chat that is coming right up about the women's U.S. title semifinals. This is the Wade Keller Pro Wrestling Post Show for Friday, December 13th, 2024. I'm Wade Keller, host of the show, the editor, publisher, and founder of the Pro Wrestling Torch weekly newsletter and the website PWTorch.com. The website celebrating its 25th anniversary this month since it was launched. And also the host of various podcasts, including the Wade Keller Post Shows, which is a podcast that for more than a decade has done post shows after Raw and over the last 5 years after Dynamite and also, of course, SmackDown. It live streams on YouTube on our PWTorch YouTube channel, so you can live stream us there if you'd like to. We invite you to do so. But otherwise, as most of you do, you download the audio version at your convenience, and we appreciate all of you doing that. If you haven't, if you're watching us on YouTube, you haven't subscribed yet, search Wade Keller on your podcast app. You'll see the red logo and blue logo pop up. Subscribe to both. Red logo's post shows. The blue logo, by the way, this week featured not just the flagship on Tuesday with Todd Martin, but yesterday, Rich Fan joined me for an hour-long preview, a thorough preview with predictions and kind of the pros and cons of different potential outcomes of KO and Cody and everything, the U.S. title tournament on in our Saturday Night's Main Event preview. And then a really cool feature after that, part 2 of the roughly 2-hour podcast, was our roundtable with Bruce Mitchell and James Caldwell that I hosted when Saturday's Main Event relaunched back in 2006 with Shawn Michaels and Shane McMahon on top. So our full review of that, reacting to, and it was a time when the McMahons were just dominating the airways, and that was kind of the lead discussion at that point. So a fun flashback, excuse me, it's one of the cool things about PWTorch VIP membership is 20 plus years of podcasts, hundreds of retro radio shows from the 90s on demand. Whatever era you're into since the late 80s, we got you covered with newsletter, PDF, and all text versions, podcasts, radio shows, streamable, downloadable, tons of other benefits. PWTorch.com/GoVIP. If you're interested in finding out more about VIP membership, you can sign up through Spotify, through your Apple account on your iPhone, through Patreon, and directly with your credit card, debit card, or PayPal. Many options, different tiers, different benefits. Check it all out. PWTorch.com/GoVIP. The other voice you hear, the other face you see if you're watching us on YouTube, is Brandon LeClair. He is a longtime PWTorch contributor, covered SmackDown, now covers PLEs on weekends for us, and also obviously appears here regularly on the post shows as co-host, and hosts Wrestling Night in America after major events. Did I say that twice? No, I talked about you writing them up on the website, yeah, but you also do the post shows. So catching myself there. Brandon, welcome back.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was weird to hear you say a longtime contributor, but then I
added
realized, I realized that like I passed 5 years in the spring, which is crazy. It doesn't feel like it, but yeah, here we are.
Yeah, thank you. It's great, been great having you on the team all this time, and you've done a lot of stuff for the site and continue to do so for podcasts and site. I say site by default, but everything. So I'm good to have you here. We got a lot more to talk about, including. Thank you. A couple super chats that I want to get to. We will start with the first one, which takes us to the Women's U.S. title tournament and a specific topic stemming from that. CJ La Chapelle says, what do you think is next for Bayley? Do you think they should turn her back heel? Brandon, I was watching Bayley and I was listening for a crowd response. And I mean, late in the match, they're fighting at ringside. Bayley's hitting a move and doing so, and it's like it was just quiet. And it's sort of the dead spot in TV, 2-hour TV formats, right? It's right before the main segment and stuff. But and I don't think the crowd's always dead for it. But it was like, wait a second, Chelsea's a good heel. That's she should be getting more of a reaction. And she has felt flat really since I thought she had a good run with the ding dong shtick with the door and the talk show during the pandemic era. And since she came back, I mean, I actually went out of my way to ask some people, is she kind of over this? Like, is she just sort of winding down? Like, she didn't seem all that inspired to me. Or maybe just sort of creatively lost. And I kind of still feel, I was told, no, she still shows up. She's excited for work and all that. But yeah, if you're a Bayley fan, I think you're kind of waiting for something to make everybody care about her as much as you do, and it just hasn't been happening. And part of that is just that the whole breakup of Damage Control was so poorly done, and they went from being the mean girls who helped propel Bayley to being a babyface to now they just sort of floated into babyface territory, which is sort of awkward because it sort of disregards what they did to Bayley. Brandon, your thoughts on what CJ is asking about here?
Yeah, with Damage Control, it helped a little bit that they were on separate shows, but then to have it kind of come back around and Bayley ends up teaming with Io at Survivor Series felt a little weird. I'm glad that this got brought up because as I was watching this show, two things really stood out to me. One, it felt like despite WWE not giving the live crowd a ton here, because as we've already kind of talked about, this was very much a infomercial for Saturday night's main event and for Raw and Netflix, and yet the crowd was up and lively for the vast majority of this show. and really into the major stars. And the one exception to that rule felt like Bayley.
Yep.
And I just couldn't help but feel like this has been an ongoing issue with this character. It felt like the turn never really got over in the way that I think they anticipated, that Bayley probably anticipated. The match at WrestleMania was solid, but it certainly felt like an undercard feud. It never reached the level of some of the top women's programs. Her title reign felt pretty underwhelming. There weren't a lot of great challengers for her at the time. She loses, rather unceremoniously to Nia Jax, and she's just sort of been floating. There's no character there. I kept thinking about Michael Cole tonight was referring, and Corey Graves too, was referring to her as the role model. Well, that was her heel gimmick. And what about a babyface character? What about the role model moniker makes sense for a babyface? I mean, if you're a babyface, you're not going to tout.
Yeah, you should go without say. You should be one, but you should call yourself that. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. I mean, it made sense for her as a heel. I mean, because she was very clearly not a role model, but wanted to portray herself as one and believe that she was one. I think you said it best, Wade. She just has seemed a little lost. And I don't know what the answer is. I don't want to see her turn again. That feels like an admission of failure and something that would have happened way too soon. I mean, obviously, she was one of the more overacts in the company back during the Hugger days, and then she and Sasha Banks were responsible for carrying the company during the pandemic, and a lot of TV was more or less carried by the two of them. And since then, it's just been sort of a downward slope. And I don't know what the answer is, but she is as cold a character as they have right now.
Do you think she's still having good matches? Like, or is she lost a step? Does she seem burned out or broken down? Or do you think just from a match standpoint, it's the same Bayley?
I think they're fine, but
yeah,
I couldn't name you a memorable Bayley match for the last couple years. I mean, I don't watch her matches and think, oh, this is full of botches. This is bad. I just think like this is a WWE TV match. This is what they present. It's fine. I'm not going to remember it tomorrow, but it wasn't offensive.
And I just, CJ, I asked what's next for her. And I mean, I think the answer is hopefully something different than this. Yeah. I mean, like that's not very specific, but this is just sort of, I don't know. I mean, she's like, her history is significant enough. She's a female legacy star. And for her to just sort of be in this role, I can understand frustrating Bayley fans who want to see some creative oomph behind her. The problem is, CJ asked, should we turn her back heel? In a sense, I'd rather she spin her wheels for another year before turning heel because it just feels too soon. I mean, like, I want if they turn her heel, I want it to work. And having her just go, well, y'all embraced the Damage Control who turned on me too quickly, and I was paying attention to it, and that made me mad. So now I don't like you anymore. I mean, is that? I mean, I don't know what else there. Maybe the transfer window will help her and give her some fresh opponents. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, her going to Raw could certainly help. I think there's also just in the women's division in general right now, they have a hard time with cultivating top end stars. You have that legacy tier, kind of the women who have been there for a long time. You have the up and comers, but you've only got a couple of women who feel like they could actually main event a show. And for a while there were several. I think this came up on the Survivor Series Wrestling Night in America that I hosted. We were talking about the situation with the women's divisions, and I think at the time, just spitballing, we came up with that at this point in time, WWE main roster women, we could only reasonably see Rhea Ripley and Bianca Belair main eventing a show. credibly main eventing like a PLE, for example.
Yeah.
And there have been times where there were 5 or 6 women that you could have believed could be in that spot. So they're struggling all around, and I think that is exacerbating the issues that we're seeing with Bayley.
Do you think Tiffany is on that path, and are you surprised with the finish tonight?
I do think she's on that path. I'm not surprised by the finish because for a while now, it has felt like they do not want to define Tiffany Stratton at that level. And I think that's similar to why you saw Bayley lose tonight. They sent a pretty clear message of what the water level is for this women's US title. And it's Michin and Chelsea Green. I mean, I think, in the hierarchy of WWE women, you would rank both Chelsea and Michin below Bayley and Tiffany Stratton. I think they want Stratton focused on the developing situation with Nia Jax and Candice LeRae.
Mm-hmm.
I also think that it makes sense to keep that title away from her when she's still carrying Money in the Bank, because she's going to presumably cash in for the more prestigious title. So no, I don't think it was all that strange for Tiffany to lose here. I think it makes sense to keep her on the path that she's on.
Yeah. Michin getting a push is, I'm not saying the surprise of the year, but I also don't think, we talk about Bayley kind of spinning her wheels. Who thought Michin would have a sense of more momentum and more of a push and more of a defined character and more of a story than Bayley? But she kind of does. Do you think she's kind of earning her time?
Yeah, I mean, it's been fine. I don't think that she has built up a level of interest from the crowd enough to say get a reaction over Chelsea Green. I mean, I think Chelsea Green, despite being a heel, is so entertaining in that role that fans are sort of naturally gravitating to her in some instances. They did it in the qualifying triple threat that she won. And then you saw it, a little bit tonight. Mm-hmm. I would expect there to be indifference tomorrow to Michin and more of a positive reaction to Chelsea Green. I think that Michin can serve as a decent challenger for that US title, but if that's something she's going to hold down the line, I don't think pulling the trigger on her being the first champion would be the right move. I think Chelsea is the play.
Totally agree. I mean, in a sense, it just seems like they're building up Michin. I don't know how much long-term. I don't know the degree to which they're long-term planning stuff like this. But if Michin's push pays off in an unexpected way, which is Chelsea gets to beat somebody clean who she's probably not going to have a big feud with, but it feels a little bit more credible that beating Michin would have meant nothing a year ago in the finals. But the fact that Michin's been, gotten a little bit, quite a bit more of a push. Mm-hmm. I think it helps Chelsea kick off what I expect to be her title reign, and it was what people wanted to see from the beginning. Now, I'm not ruling out Michin wins as a short-term run for Chelsea to win with help from Niven or something like that. They certainly do that. I'm not going into tomorrow night just with certitude of what's going to happen, but I'm expecting Chelsea to win. Big audience, history made. Let Chelsea celebrate, and then we go there. So yeah,
to their credit too, they're trying to do it with Candice LeRae too. I mean, there's been a more sustained effort with her in recent weeks, which I think it's good to get some other women involved on a weekly basis. If one, you're going to introduce a secondary title, and two, you've lost so much of your main event talent, you've got to start cultivating new stars.
Yep. We have another super chat I want to get to here. Let's see here. This from Andrave's Gaming. Is SmackDown going to Netflix too big? Is SmackDown going to Netflix too big, fan? Thank you, Wade. Oh, I get it. Okay, this is where I'm so reliant on punctuation, people. I'm not reading them first sometimes. Like where I'm glancing at to see the topic, but I can't work out the punctuation. Is SmackDown going to Netflix too? Big fan. Thank you, Wade. Gotcha. Sorry, Andrave's. No, SmackDown's not going to Netflix. WWE likes the variety right now. I mean, they've got broadcast with the CW, which has helped put NXT ahead of Dynamite now. Tony Khan's helped that happen also, by the way. Little dig. But true. And so NXT is now ahead of Dynamite by a little bit, but more often than not. And they're on broadcast, and that's good. They reach people who don't have cable and don't have streaming services. And then you're on traditional linear cable on the top cable network, USA Network. And then you're on Netflix, which is streaming along, and obviously Peacock too. And then NBC with the specials. Obviously, they reach a much larger audience and even NXT with that. So I think for going into 2025, Brandon, this is a perfect mix. They're going to be on SmackDown and USA for years. USA paid big money for it. And I think that diversity is healthy. And I don't think WWE would want both shows on Netflix, despite the distribution advantages of just instantly being everywhere Netflix is. I still think they've got to keep their eye on the United States market and not just tearing away from people the way to watch it and, quote, forcing them to watch on Netflix. Now, that said, Netflix is big enough. They've got more subscribers than what have traditional cable now, but they're really close. And I don't know if that includes the kind of the streaming cable in addition to traditional cable. I think it does. But they're pretty close. But, I mean, it wouldn't be the worst thing if they were. But no, they're not, and they won't be for years. Brandon, any thoughts on what I said there?
I just wanted to add, they are going to, SmackDown is going to Netflix internationally.
Thank you. That's a great point, because then they don't have any downside.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that here in the US, obviously it makes a ton of sense for them to remain on terrestrial cable for the time being. I would assume that by the time the next deal comes forward, the landscape will probably have changed again so much that they may want to go fully streaming, fully Netflix, or maybe it leans back in the other direction because these streamers just get so big and so expensive that people start flocking back to cable or some other alternative. I mean, how long is the deal? 4 years, 5 years?
For Netflix?
Yeah, this USA deal.
Oh, that's what's one.
For SmackDown.
It's 4 or 5. I think it's 4. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Though. Yeah.
So I mean, either way, that's so much time in TV. That's forever.
No, it is, and I mean, there is still obviously value, for being on traditional cable, because as much as people have access to Netflix, I think some people. There's people who don't have Netflix who have cable, but there's a big overlap, but it's not 100% overlap. But I think there's also people who they don't want to have Netflix in order to watch wrestling. Like they're going to have their cable for ESPN. They might float in and out of Netflix. I don't know. Just this diversity is great. And like Saturday's main event is going to be on NBC and Peacock, because there's some people who just don't have the antenna to get NBC broadcast. Get one. It's cheap. It's cool to have. There's a lot of free channels out there. People kind of forget there's a lot of free stuff you can have with a simple antenna. People get so hung up on thinking they have to pay for everything. But if you don't have an antenna, you don't have cable that carries NBC. I mean, Peacock's on your phone on an app. It's just easy to watch. So obviously they're going everywhere. And AEW's on this too, with moving Dynamite or keeping Dynamite on TBS and TNT, but also streaming on Max. It's the way of the future. I mean, the new shows that come out on NBC. And they say, and also streaming on Peacock the next day, or on CBS, also streaming on Paramount the next day. It's just the way of the world right now. And like you said, Brandon, who knows where we are? And I think it actually might be a 5-year deal, but wherever in 5 years, the world's going to be so different in so many different ways. So yeah.
I think the only thing that's relatively easy to predict right now, and even that, I mean, it could change, but I do expect the WWE Network content to move to Netflix when the Peacock deal expires, which that happens much sooner. It's 26, right?
What is 26? Sorry.
The Peacock deal expired.
Oh yeah. So for some reason, I was thinking 26 was years away, and I'm like having to do the math in my head. I don't know why I thought that, but yeah, that's what's
So that to me is much more immediate. And I still think it's likely that WWE Network, as it exists, shifts to Netflix at that time.
Yep. Derek Mitchell has the data. It's a 5-year deal. So you're right, Brandon, when I wasn't sure if it's 4 or 5. $1.4 billion deal, and then 4 annual specials on NBC. They're getting to 2 of them pretty quick back to back, making a statement there. But they'll get into a regular rhythm. obviously with those specials, probably spread them out a little bit more. Standard Deviation says nobody under 30 gets cable. Most of my friends don't even have TVs. They all watch stuff on their devices. My son just took his TV out of his bedroom. It's like he didn't need it. He's got his tablet and his phone and his laptop, and he never turned it on. He's like, well, if it was a nicer TV, you might watch it. And I was like, okay. There's a nicer TV in the other room. Yeah. He's great. It was just a funny line. Junaid says, I wonder how USA felt about the show they paid for, going so hard to promote a show airing on Netflix. Maybe they don't care at all. I mean, they promoted Saturday's Main Event so much, and I think they just know. That's a good question. If I'm NBC Universal, USA Network, I don't mind them plugging Netflix as long as they reciprocate. When they're on Netflix, you're going to reach a whole new audience, and you want them saying Friday on SmackDown on USA Network. As long as it goes both ways, one hand watches the other. It's just everybody's just scratching and clawing for their share, but I don't think you can. If you don't play nice, people aren't going to want to play at all, and you've got to be willing to. I mean, it used to be where CBS wouldn't plug the NFL games on NBC or Fox or vice versa, and now you just see the whole schedule. It's like on ESPN announcers are going, Thursday night on Amazon or on Prime Video and Saturday on it. It's just everybody plugs everybody now because everybody knows everybody else exists, and and when you have a partner as big as the NFL, you kind of do what they say, and that is promote all our partners in all our games. Yeah.
The promoting the brand supersedes promoting the network.
Yep. Derek does confirm that Peacock deal expires in 2026. Thanks, Derek, for either having that at your fingertips or looking it up. A lot of numbers and dates to remember. Ken Arnold says the NBA clearly sees where things are headed with their new deal with Disney, NBC, and Amazon. More streaming, but the NBA has a much younger audience on average compared to the NFL, college football, and Major League Baseball. So, yeah. All right. So let's go. Let's go back to CJ with another super chat. Thank you, CJ. Why does it seem like there was no long-term plan when Bayley was champion this year? CJ, it's a super chat, and I wish I had a great answer for you. And I don't, but I agree with you, and I have been sort of lamenting it too. Like, I'm a fan of Bayley, and she's, her initial gimmick and where she is now are so different, and I don't know that, she went from the original, I don't know how to describe it, hugger, I guess, for little girls, and then the heel turn with the role model, and then she's just Bayley. It's like good old Bayley. I mean, it's almost like Natalya as a babyface. She's still here, and she's been around a long time, and she's competitive, but it's a shame. Because I mean, I think Bayley, when given a very specific task, can really accomplish it well, and it has been, just sort of largely forgettable once she broke away from Damage Control, and even that was kind of a mess. Brandon,
when a wrestler shifts into a more of a legacy role, you expect them to sort of revisit their most successful popular character, and Bayley is not doing that. You're getting a slightly truncated version of the role model character to fit the babyface role, and that's all that there really has been. I mean, to dive a little deeper into the point about her title reign lacking the long-term storytelling or long-term planning, I think a lot of it just had to do with a lack of depth in the division at the time. I mean, Charlotte Flair has been out for the better part of the last couple of years.
Yep.
You lost Sasha Banks, Mercedes Moné. Bianca Belair was a babyface, and Bayley is just freshly turned babyface. She can't really work with Bianca. I mean, that left really a heel Rhea Ripley, and Rhea is on the opposite brand. And if you had tried to pair Bayley, a freshly turned babyface, against the wildly popular heel Rhea Ripley, that wouldn't have gone well either. So just lack of options.
Yeah. Brock Benningfield says just give her some time off and bring her back with something new. Sometimes that is what, I mean, you don't want to wish an injury on her or anything, but injuries sometimes in the long run help if someone has to take time off. Sadler Version 3 says Hugger Bayley had to end. That character had run its course even in NXT. Yeah, I mean that was not. If Travis Bryant talked about that early on, like when she was in NXT and they hadn't called her up, he's like, "You got to call her up. You got to call her up. That gimmick is not going to last. You got to seize it. Well, you can." BJF says, "I think Bayley could be revitalized when some of the women come up from NXT and she has fresh opponents to feud with. I could see a feud with Tatum Paxley, and that is where I was heading with this, Brandon. I think with Bayley, what's going to ignite something in her is a fresh opponent who's worthy, and I don't think." Even Alexa Bliss and I'm trying to think of people not in the people who've been around a long time that we've seen her around like that. Obviously, Becky, Charlotte, Sasha's gone. I don't think that's going to be a spark. I think she's at a point where we need to see her against somebody completely new with a new dynamic. And fortunately, there's a lot of options for that. Had Jade been a little more ready and not in the tag division, she could have been a babyface opponent for a heel Bayley, or vice versa, a babyface Bayley trying to stop this arrogant force of nature just come in and started to dominate. But WWE went a different direction with Jade. But that's an example of what I think could have freshened up Bayley, as if she had somebody like Jade to work with. But otherwise, I mean, if she turns heel, she feuds with the babyface Tiffany or vice versa, or there's some call-ups from NXT. And I mean, there's a number of names who over the next couple months and then a couple years are going to be called up. I think that's going to be where the next big run and good run of Bayley comes, is when she's the sort of elder statesman, the senior member of that group. And I don't want her to just be a gatekeeper, but in a sense, she'll be a big test for some of the women who are coming in, and some will beat her and others will run into her and be knocked down.
This was brought up in the chat a couple of times, and something I thought of as well. The one thing, as far as I agree with the notion that upcoming call-ups and some of the talent coming down the pipeline might better serve her for a spark, but I do wonder if, as I said, a couple people alluded to this in the chat, that the way that Naomi was behaving tonight, it sort of feels like she may have been the one to attack Jade. And if that's the case, and there's a Naomi heel turn coming, yep, I wonder if a really, really heated personal rivalry where Bayley can really be the hurt babyface who is, just deeply hurt by being betrayed by Naomi, if that can spark something for
her. What if Bayley did it and she's just been laying low? What if this is like, I'm taking her? I mean, it'd be red herrings left and right and a total unexpected twist. But we got that with New Day not turning on, or Kofi and Xavier not turning on each other, but uniting against Big E. So they might.
And it would give the baby faces, a victory lap, because when Bayley first turned, they did do the thing that they've been doing with Roman Reigns, where other baby faces, instead of just immediately jumping to her aid, said, "Whoa, wait a minute. Back up here. Like, think about all the things that she's done to us." So that's a victory lap for your baby faces if you go that route.
Yeah, absolutely. JC Scooby votes for Bayley needs to go away and find herself. What's her gimmick and wrestling? So, all right. So the Naomi thing, let's expand on that just a little bit, because Belair and Naomi came over to Nick Aldis and said, "What do you got? You wanted to talk to us? Do you know who attacked Jade?" And Bianca felt not suspiciously, but earnestly interested in what Aldis had found. And there might be some peril in reading too much into the acting and the script writing in WWE compared to like a refined prestige TV series where, they spend 2 months on every episode, post-producing and reshooting scenes and stuff. But it came across like Naomi was the guilty one, because she now she benefited from it. That she is now tag champion as of tonight. And so I don't know. I mean, it almost feels too obvious, but at the same time, it makes sense. So I don't mind obvious if it makes sense and it leads somewhere. Just talk a little bit more about how this has been handled, Brandon, and if you think your interpretation of tonight is the same as mine.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is probably the direction that they're headed. I think I like it a little bit more than Bianca turning. I think that there's still money and there's still opportunity with Bianca as a top babyface, and I think that if you have Naomi being the one that turns, then it opens up the possibility for Bayley to step in there and be, the scorn baby face who just is beside herself. And you can do a multi-layered story there where Naomi can essentially try to make Bayley out to be the bad guy, in the sense that, she said that she attacked Jade but would never attack Bayley. She's just doing it for the opportunity and to get ahead. So there's a lot of different avenues that they can go there. But I think they've done a fine job so far. I was unsure, and Wade, I don't know if you've clarified this at any point, but is there a legitimate injury to Jade, or was this?
Yeah, she has a neck issue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So
I confirmed that independently. I mean, WWE isn't. I mean, it's with medical stuff. If they don't release something, I mean, it ends up sometimes being hearsay or friend, and it's if they don't release it, then sometimes it's considered private. But I mean, it's pretty commonly thought in locker room or known that she had some neck issue.
Okay, because I didn't know if I could have easily seen it being they just didn't want to put her in the War Games environment, and so they concocted this. But I guess it just depends on how long she's going to be out too. If it's a legitimate thing, how long they think they're going to be without her, and how long they're going to have to play this out. But I think they've done a decent enough job with it so far.
David Hager points out in the chat, she was the one who told Nick Aldis there was a precedent of replacing injuries and tag holders. She was ready to go with bringing the facts.
Which credit to them too for even mentioning that precedent exists in wrestling.
There's a lot of bad precedent, and there's a lot of convenient precedent. Whatever you want has probably been done before. It's not great, but it's not awful. I mean, it's fine. I mean, Commander inherited Juice Robinson's spot in the tournament due to injury. I mean, it's fine. I mean, generally, I think the title should be held up, and they should have a tournament if one of the partners gets injured. But it's not a big deal. Brock Benningfield says, "I'm liking these whodunits." David Hager, by the way, says he thinks Charlotte Flair did it. It would get Belair versus Flair at WrestleMania if Jade isn't ready to return. That's Naomi. I don't even know if they're not really hitting us over the head with it, where I'd say it's a red herring that Naomi did it, but they haven't ruled it out, and it seems certainly with what they did tonight, they want us to think that a little bit or quite a bit. But yeah, it could be someone like Charlotte, and I mean, I don't think that's a bad approach either. I mean, do you want to waste this angle on Naomi? But it almost is. I don't know that people are going to be super excited about her against Jade one-on-one. I mean, I just don't feel like that. But Charlotte taking out Jade, cutting a promo to explain it, that feels like a big marquee match, Charlotte against Jade.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that it just depends on how much they're viewing this as a big deal. I think that if Naomi is the one to turn, the intrigue to me is in the feud with Bianca and with Bayley on the back end of that. Whereas if it's Charlotte, obviously it's more about Jade and Bianca. Jade obviously first. I think that if it's Naomi, she probably works her program with Bianca and then just gets beat relatively easily by Jade when she comes back. I don't think that they're viewing Naomi at that level, and she doesn't have to. I mean, it can just be a big singles win for Jade.
Yep, fair. Yep, very true. All right, let's. By the way, if you want to be a video caller on the show, if you're a Patreon supporter, there's a link up on the PWTorch VIP Patreon page, and you can, if you're watching us live on YouTube, you can call us right now and be a video caller. Turn off your camera to be audio only. If you prefer, same thing. If you're a VIP member, PWTorchVIP.com has my SmackDown report up with a link to both a link up to be a video or audio caller. It's just a benefit for being a VIP member or Patreon supporter. Sean Plichta is one of them. Sean from Tennessee. Welcome, Sean. Good to see you. Good to talk to you. What do you want? What's on your mind? What do you want to cover that we haven't covered?
Well, first, can you hear me okay? I wanted to ask that real quick. Yeah,
I saw you mentioned your AirPods. If you find my AirPods, by the way, let me know. They disappeared last week, and I always put them in the case because for exactly this reason. And I open up my.
That's what Find My is for, Wade.
What? Oh,
that's what Find My is for.
I know, but I don't know where they. I don't know where they are. I tried find it, and it didn't find them. So I don't know if if the batteries were low or what. So yeah, I mean, here, look, empty. I'm sad. I'm so good about it, and then, but it's winter, so now I've got my. It's winter, so I wear these now because it's cold outside. So they're like fashionable earmuffs with music coming out of them. So the timing was good, but yeah, I'm gonna have to replace them if they don't turn up. I retracing my steps. It's a bigger mystery in my life than who injured Jade. Is how the heck did that happen? Checked every pocket. I'm sure I left my laptop bag, and then they weren't there. Anyway, I'm boring people. Go ahead, Sean.
Well, it's funny because I don't have that problem. I have my AirPods here with me. They're here. My case is being a pain. Like I'm sitting there charging it. It's supposedly charging, and then I go to.
I got a good case doing nothing, Sean. Here, let's pass it along. I got a case doing no good.
I'll take it.
Yeah.
No. Right. So going back to CJ, I love his passion on Bayley because I'm as big a Bayley fan as anybody. And we were talking in the chat. I mean, the hugger would have worked. It would have worked. It absolutely would have worked. She won the title way too fast, and they ruined it. End of story. It would have been one of the biggest things in wrestling for a long, long time, and that's a whole nother story. But as far as Bayley now, yeah, I just think there is something just missing, and I can't put my finger on it. But I hope they figure something out because, again, I think she's still very valuable to what the women's division could be. There's a really good women's division there. And going back to Naomi, it's not that I don't want Naomi to be the one to have attacked Jade. I don't want to see her wrestle a lot. If she's a heel and they do other things, I just think it'd be fine. And I just don't think her in the ring a lot is the best thing for her. I think her having a different persona actually might do something for Naomi. I think people like Naomi, but even the Glow kind of has a ceiling on it where it's like it can only go so far, and they've just done it for so long that I think a heel turn would actually be good for her. But the question I was going to ask you was going back to, I'm glad they brought Gargano and Ciampa on and kind of talking about, why they did some of what they did. And I did like the Gargano said, I was waiting to do what I was going to do. I just didn't know when the right time was going to be. So I was like, at least they brought that up where I was planning on doing something like this. I just didn't know when it was going to happen. And then the time happened and bam, I did it. I pulled the trigger on it. So did you think that was a good explanation? I thought they did at least a decent job of talking about it and kind of bringing that up and why it happened and kind of bringing up the match with him and Shelly here coming up.
I thought they did a great job, dare I say, with Gargano and Ciampa, making me care about him. I mean, in general they have, but I love the kind of gleeful, you got the red carpets rolled out for you guys. You got our rematch. We didn't get our rematch. Ciampa the hothead, Gargano the schemer. And I thought it was good that we heard from Shelly and Sabin later in the show. This is like, it. I don't want to like overstate it and say it's great, but it's really good. Well done. And I like a month ago, I was like DIY. It's like I was half expecting them to get cut and just show up in AEW and feud with Private Party or something. Like this is great. Gargano and Ciampa deserve this. They're good workers. They paid a ton of dues. They get over when they're given a chance. I thought the vignette was really well filmed, and yeah, like you highlighted, Sean, Gargano's explanation I think was good. Brandon, what do you think?
Yeah, I was really glad that they gave Gargano the opportunity to kind of spell out his thought process over the course of the last several months, because I mean the turn was justified. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's something that we don't get enough of in wrestling these days. I mean, companies do a good job of it here and there, but especially in the tag team division, which is often overlooked, especially in WWE, it's not often that we get a story that runs this deep, at least for one of these sides. And I think Gargano saying that, after they won the titles, after they lost the titles in Cleveland, he was incredibly low and no one seemed to care. And he wanted a rematch and believed that DIY deserved a rematch contractually, and they just didn't get it. And not only did they not get it, but a team that just walked in the door usurped them and won the titles. So I thought it made perfect sense. It justified the turn in every way, and it did a couple of things for me on a lighter note. One, it ensured that we weren't going to get another Ciampa and Gargano breakup, because as good as their matches are against each other, there's no way that they're going to get the NXT treatment on main roster TV, and it's just going to be, a shell of its former self. Secondly, with the heel turn, it seems likely that they'll get new theme music, which please, for the love of all things decent, they need new theme music.
Yes. Lots of good points there. Chat room listening and chiming in. Standard Deviation said, I didn't care about DIY a month ago, but I'm no longer completely ambivalent. Hey, I said that. My only critique is the use of black and white for the babyface response by the Motor City Machine Guns. That's just cool. It's just black. It's more silver and it had a cool look to it. Brock Benningfield says these two teams are living the dream on wrestling's biggest stage. Standard Deviation says black and white editing with underlying music feels more like a heel thing. So chiming in there. Junaid says WWE has used these teams fantastically. Gargano gave a great explanation. I hope Gargano makes the most of his one-time, quote, use your child to get storyline over card. Yeah, that's right. His how old was the kid? 2? He's not going to remember this. Come on. That's such a heel thing to say. Just bring your 2-year-old doesn't know what a title is. If you want it, it's like an 8-year-old. Yeah, I'll buy that. But Brock Benningfield says these two teams are living the dream on wrestling's biggest stage. And Darrell Freeman says SmackDown is really adding a lot to the tag division, and the story is really hitting.
Yeah, great point.
And Sadler Vision 3 said, I really like the DIY promo, but I dislike the loud music during it.
Another good point.
Brandon, how are you with the music?
It didn't completely take me out of it, but it
wasn't like Punkin, Roman, and Heyman. That was just
It didn't feel like overly like Hollywoodified.
Yeah,
that's not a word, but
no, that's a good word.
I didn't feel that word. I didn't feel like I had a surrogate editor telling me exactly how I should feel after every line, and that's how the Punk Reigns thing it felt. It felt like you're manipulating me. Let me just feel this and not have the music tell me exactly how to feel. When it's a vignette, it's post-produced. They're talking to you. It would have been fine without it, but it didn't jump out to me anywhere in the same category as Punk.
I think the best comparison for wrestling that I could make, the Roman and Paul Heyman felt like some of the campier aspects of like Lucha Underground.
Yeah,
not in a good way.
Yep. Yeah, no question. I mean, Lucha Underground was an exciting concept. I interviewed Chris DeJoseph, who was a producer of it. It's recently went up on our archives, him talking about it. And I'm glad they did it. But I don't know if it spawned a lot of cinematic stuff, and conceptually I'm not against it as a kind of a separate entity, because it felt like a scripted drama that happened to cut to real wrestling, as opposed to real wrestling with a bunch of cheesy scripted drama. And in that setting, it works more for me. I
didn't intend, like, it wasn't a knock on Lucha Underground. I think it worked in the context of what they were trying to do, but the second you take that concept out and you put it in a WWE style show, it doesn't work at all.
Exactly. That's kind of I think I'm glad that's what you meant, and that's what I was kind of getting to too, in terms of not everything about Lucha Underground worked, but the framework of presenting scripted stuff with music. If the presupposition is this is a scripted TV show and we break away as part of it, kind of like Field of Dreams. It's like, it's not a baseball game that has a bunch of scripted skits. It's a scripted movie that happens to have some baseball scenes. And that's, if you watch Lucha Underground in the spirit of that, it's not offensive to your sensibilities as a fan. When you watch over, the Cody Roman Stadium thing, had a lot going for it, made them seem like big stars, but man, I would have, dialed back the post-production a lot. And I think anytime anything feels more organic, it's better. And Punk and Roman did not need help like they got last week. But was it just last week, or was it 2 weeks? I don't know. Whenever that was. Let's see. BJF says Lucha Underground was amazing. I didn't view it as a wrestling show, but a Breaking Bad style show about wrestling. And Derek Mitchell says, I'm glad the Machine Guns TNA Legacy tag teams getting used, as opposed to how the Rock and Roll Express uninspiring run in 93 and 98 in the WWF. I like Gargano saying, I'm glad. It was sort of a Gunther thing, compliment followed by just a nasty insult. I'm glad he got the most important tag team titles. They've been important to wrestling. I'm glad he got his flowers. too bad it was for his funeral. Like, I mean,
Right.
I thought that worked. It sounds like he's being gracious for a second. In a way, kind of is acknowledging the legacy status and looking up to them. But then the sinister heel kind of punch at the end framed it as a heel and not a gracious statement by him. Cool.
Yeah.
Sean, back to you.
Yeah, I loved it. Well, I was going to say, and Darrell said that's I want the tag team division to feel bigger and more important, and this does do that, and I hope they continue on that path because there's a lot of good tag teams. Again, the Street Profits, we've talked about them for ad nauseum. They just feel like they're in not a bad place, but they're just feel kind of in the middle of nowhere, and Montez just has potential, and Angelo has a lot of potential, so I want to see them kind of use some of that potential in the right way. One quick thing I wanted to bring up, because I don't know if we talk about it at some point, but I wanted to bring it up. I know it doesn't mean as much on the actual show itself, but I just think even though he's not in the greatest spot, and Carmelo, what happened to Carmelo was still not right. I still don't think they should be doing that with him. Again, I have nothing against Braun Strowman as a person. He's just kind of over the hill for me. Like, he just kind of is what he is. And for him just to come in and beat Carmelo with one move and just make Carmelo look like a dope, I don't know. Can he come back from it? Yes, he can. I think there's something they can do with Carmelo. I think he's super talented. But I don't know. I mean, maybe they just might not think that highly of him on the main roster. And I think that would be a travesty because I do think Carmelo is really, really good, both as a face and as a heel. I think there's a lot you can do with him, a lot of great matches you can have, and him just losing over and over and over. You're defining him down to a level where I don't know where you can come back from.
It crosses my mind to ask because what Brock Benningfield brought up. I'm starting to wonder if Hayes has heat backstage. This isn't Vince McMahon thing. We're always too small. But he's not big. But to use him as, I'm trying to think of an apt comparison, almost Grayson Waller-esque. He's just a punchline. Like, oh, I got a match for you. And Hayes like, I feel bad for him. I'm going to make an example out of him. You're like, okay, who's it going to be? And then Braun, and he got a couple spots in, but Braun he bounced off of Braun. And there's no way you can look at Carmelo Hayes as a credible threat to anything as long as what's happened recently with him, including and especially tonight, is in our memories. And I don't know why. I mean, obviously in NXT there was talent there. I don't think top tier talent, but when he was a number one draft pick, they got big plans for him. And instead the story's been he's a bust as a number one draft pick, which is a story you can tell, but I don't think it's what Carmelo wanted. Brandon, your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there could have been a compelling story to tell there as a bust, especially if you want to eventually make him a babyface. I mean, like, WWE loves pulling from real life headlines and from other sports. And I just think, like, this isn't all that unlike him being the number one draft pick. It's not unlike somebody like Baker Mayfield, who's number one overall draft pick, played well at times in Cleveland, but was generally called a bust because of, Cleveland. And then he goes elsewhere and succeeds. And now he's like one of the most beloved players in the league because people like to root for the underdog. And like, you could have told that story with Carmelo Hayes. Technically, you still can. He's a bust as a number one draft pick.
If he becomes a quarterback for the Minnesota Vikings, he can be. He can be the Sam Darnold of 2025.
Yeah. So like,
that was Dobbs last year too. Vikings are like this place for like quarterbacks to have at least
rehabilitating.
Yeah. But I mean, we got a great head coach and a great offensive line and a couple top tier receivers, so they can. You better be decent to very good. But yeah, I'm as you're talking about me, I'm thinking of Sam Darnold as you're telling your story too. And they can tell that story. I mean, that's the thing. All hope is not lost if you have talent. I mean, it just isn't. There's so many people who, whatever, they're out of favor or they're seen for a certain role. They spend some time. And then WWE fans, and you can't turn around and make him a credible U.S. champion in February. I mean, they have done enough damage to him. It's going to have to going to have to feel like a new chapter of his career with a big change that gives us a reason to believe he's in a different spot. But I mean, Brandon, talent-wise, I think he's worth having around. I mean, he's playing his part well. It just isn't the part that seems to have much of a future in any kind of top level way. I mean, he's slightly above Akira Tozawa.
Slightly.
Slightly, yeah.
I mean, Akira Tozawa might have more wins recently. Just
maybe.
Yeah,
well, no.
I don't think that he is dead and buried, but it's going to take a while to rehabilitate him to a credible, U.S. title level, if that is something that they want to, if they want to do. But it's going to take a bit of time. I mean, they have really sort of made him the butt of a joke in the way that Triple H's main roster television has not done with a lot of guys.
Yep. And I often on the show say there's no shame in playing a role that isn't winning. And I make fun of, people like Malachi Black, who just seems stuck in the 70s, like, this weird, I don't do jobs. It's like, Terry Gordy and Bruce Brody didn't want to, and Stan Henson didn't want to do jobs because they made most of their money in Japan, and word would get back to Japan, it would hurt them. Like, don't be a mark for yourself. Like, you're part of being a villain is losing in movies and TV and in wrestling. That said, how Carmelo is being treated is certainly jarringly different than I think what a lot of people who saw his work in NXT thought. Brock Benningfield says Carmelo was killing it in NXT. Sadler version 3 says Melo's booking feels very Vincey. But Junaid says not everyone can win every single week. You aren't buried for losing a couple matches. Hayes is very good in the ring, but his promos are hit and miss. He had a relatively competitive match with Cody. He had a competitive match with Cody, but that's like Cody's thing. He beat even people he's going to beat. He has a competitive match with them, and I think he, wears that as a badge of honor. That he gives a lot. It's not Braun Strowman's job to give a lot to Carmelo. I mean, that it's WWE. Unless you're a top tier star, the size difference is going to be what they harp on. So yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, because they
Sean,
had
back to you.
Yeah, because they had well, they said he's fighting a mystery opponent, so of course that's kind of the out is. Well, he didn't know who he was wrestling, so of course he's not going to be prepared for who's coming out.
Well, I mean, yeah,
and that's fair. And then you have the stuff with Andrade. You have this oh, we're going to have all these matches, which yes, the matches were really really good and showed what he can do in the ring. Like we all know that, and they were able to show it. But there was they went nowhere from it. They both just lost to LA Knight in a match, and it was like, okay, well, what did that do anyone? That did no one any favors. It was just it wasn't a waste of 7 matches because it showed the talent that they both have in the ring, but ultimately the story just didn't go anywhere. And so you're just kind of like, well, Carmelo can come back. I still think he's got the talent. He's really good. I think something will happen down the road, but I just losing that many times in a row, I just don't think is the way to go. But we'll see where they go. I mean, I'm curious of the story they can tell with them, and we'll see.
Well, before we pivot away from that, Ken Arnold says, I think Carmelo will end up doing well, but it's rough right now. I don't think reigniting his feud with Trick Williams whenever he debuts on the main roster would help. 27 Newsman says, the number one draft pick story is completely original for wrestling, and Melo will be fine. And Chris Johnson says, I agree, 27 Newsman. I think it's part of the story they're telling with him. I'm more confident he'll be fine than I am with Austin Theory. Interesting. No, we'll see. Yeah, so Sean, back to you.
Well, the last thing I guess I'll bring up from my end is I'm definitely excited about the show tomorrow. I will not be able to watch it live because I've got a party with some friends that I'm going to, but I will go back and watch after the fact. If you had to put a percentage on, I don't think Cody should lose. I just don't think he should. Is there what percentage would you have that you think there's any chance that KO wins? Because again, the story's been very, very good, very well told. KO has been such a good job, done a great job as a heel, telling his story really well, making it believable that you could see his side. Very, very well told. I just, as much as I like KO, I just don't think he needs to win this title. He's lost it too many times. Winning it now would just feel kind of weird. And Cody's just in a really good spot. I mean, Cody, this is the first really good feud since Roman that he's had that has made you sink your teeth into him and want to get behind him. And so what percentage would you guys have on KO winning? I would put like 2, but that's even high for me.
2% is high. All right. Yesterday, Rich Fan and I talked about this for a while. So everyone who hasn't listened yet, dig on
sorry.
In. No, yeah, no, you don't have to be sorry. I brought up the possibility of it. I said, don't bet on it. So I think it's less than 50%, Sean. But with all the big events that they have coming up, having got sort of a hot potato title change, which I'm for, but not in excess. You know, it's like I talk about on AEW pay-per-views, for example. Sometimes there's like, oh, that finish works. And then 4 matches later, they did it 3 more times. And you're like, okay, what? Like, let's not, you know, even there was a couple spots tonight that were a little too similar at ringside where someone pushed somebody out of the way. Niven, I think, saved Chelsea in the same way that Jacob saved Solo, if I'm remembering right. Like, it's just in WWE's like usually pretty good about that. Oh, no, that's too similar. Let's not do it. You know, William Regal talks about, you know, wrestlers shouldn't be doing there's moves you should not, if the main eventers are doing it, word should be sent to the undercard. You're not allowed to do it if the main eventers are doing big spots that are going to be too similar. And that level of detail is helpful. So, anyway, back to the point, hot potato title changes, you know, just kind of short-term title changes. Cody loses, shows some vulnerability. There might be a story that they're telling that ties in. Rich and I talked about the Randy Orton factor as a possibility. And then Cody gets it back. Netflix debut, wins the world title on the first Netflix. That's history. The top singles men's title change hands on the first Netflix. Or they throw a bone to SmackDown, you know, and give SmackDown a big main event to kind of go, hey, NBC, Universal, don't panic. You're still, you know, we still find you very important. Through the trade, the transfer window and stuff like that, or some special. And then you have Saturday's main event. You could follow up with Cody winning in January. I mean, so Rich and I got really into it. I think Cody's going to retain, but I'm not. If KO wins, Brandon, I just think they're up to something, and it's probably going to be pretty good. And don't do hot potato title changes again for a while. But this would be a news-making one that would really put Saturday's main event on the map, and then give them just a turnkey rematch that they can insert into Netflix on a big SmackDown at Saturday's main event, or the Royal Rumble as a main event match. Brandon, your thoughts?
Yeah, I percentage-wise, to answer your question, Sean, I mean, I'm sub 10%. But for I mean that you know, 7, 8, 9, wherever you want to land, like for the reason that
I'm at 6.3% if it helps.
Okay.
For whatever reason, I it would be for the reasons that Wade laid out. I think that there is a story to tell there if you want to, and it is enticing to have a big title change on one of your major shows. You know, on two ends, you get the title change tomorrow night on Saturday night's main event, and then you get another one on Netflix, or as Wade brought up, SmackDown, wherever you want to do it. I still think it's unlikely. I think they want to keep Cody strong. Like you brought up, Sean, I don't think that he's had a lot of credible challengers and programs that he can really sink his teeth into. So this is really the first one to me that stands out in a major way. But they could just be thinking, hey, we gave Cody that big signature win over Gunther, which to me was sending a message that, hey, we're acknowledging here that Cody has not had a great, you know, lineage of challengers over the course of his reign, and they could maybe think that's enough. But my you know, if I were putting money on it, it would be on Cody to retain.
Yeah, I don't. I think, to me, if this was the first match between them, I know the story was a little different before, like the way they were telling it. If he hadn't already lost to Cody, I would say maybe do it, and I would love to see where they go, and I still can see where they go. I just think that KO's already lost to him. It would seem weird for KO just to win the title now. It just seems a little weird. Now, could KO do a great job? Yeah, I think he can, and I think, you know, Cody underneath is obviously great with him too. He's very good from underneath, but KO losing once already, I just don't think goes to him winning the title now, at least in my personal view. But I think it's going to be a fun show. I'm really looking forward to it. I just want to say, Brandon, I appreciate. I had to talk to you, man. When you were on here, I was like, I got to get on, even if my AirPods, whatever. Who cares?
Stop flaunting.
Yes, and go VIP people. Seriously, like this is 7 years for me, and I wouldn't want anything different. So I appreciate you guys having me on.
I was just listening earlier, and I mean with all due respect to everything else we're doing right now, the number one reason to go VIP is to hear the Scott Hall interview from 18 years ago. If you people are VIP and not listening to that,
That was
go
good.
listen to it this weekend.
It's really good.
And you can, by the way, you can subscribe to just our Vault, on your phone app, your podcast app. We have a breakdown. You can do current events and retro shows. So all the Wade Keller podcast flashbacks, by the way, can be on a separate feed from the new shows. It's very customizable, and go dig up all the Scott Hall stuff and listen to it. The stuff, what he did, it went up today. What he said about Goldberg, I mean, he called him the P word. He's like, I'm older than him. Give me 6 weeks, I'll kick his ass. The guy, I don't want to make up words, but I'm listening to it. I'm like, I remember Scott going off on Goldberg, but man, did he, when people, it was 6-7 hours of Scott Hall never talking about any of this stuff before. And he agreed to do a Torch Talk with me, thought it would take an hour, and we did 3.5 hours. And he's like, we're both like, we got to do more. And I don't know if it was a day or two later, did another 3-4 hours, walking through his whole career. Never done anything close to that before. And really, really, I mean, I felt Scott had tons of problems. A lot of people don't like being around him. He was very moody, even to me after this interview. There were times when he's happy to see me, other times, and he's done the podcast with me a number of times. You never know what you get with Scott, but he's one of the smartest wrestling minds out there. And in this installment that we just put up today, he's talking about what he thinks about current WWE talent at the time. What Johnny Nitro, whatever he was going by at the time, Johnny Nitro.
Oh gosh,
what was his name? What was it? Oh, I think he just called him Johnny Nitro, but it's John Morrison. He was like, he was critiquing him, and he's talking about Carlito, and it's like, this is the type of like granular stuff. He's like, Carlito, I know you're left-handed, but you got to learn how to punch right-handed and make him look decent if you want to be a star in this business. Like, he's just like, Scott saw everything, and there's a reason, he was as influential and respected despite all the bad stuff going on with him, with drugs and moodiness and a lot of baggage in his life. And it's a must-listen interview. It's one of my favorites, and I find myself like, I got my to-do list at my desk, and then I start editing the Vault with Scott Hall, and it's like, 15 minutes later, I'm like, I better get back to work. So PWTorch.com/GoVIP.
Yeah.
It's not just the new stuff. It's not just the ad-free stuff. It's not just the newsletter that we put up with exclusive content. Those archives and those vaults are fascinating if you're a student of the industry, and this Scott Hall thing is good. So yeah, there's the NOI plug. I threw in a couple anecdotes, so hopefully it wasn't just a plug, but sharing a little bit of what he said too. Yeah. But it's also a plug. So thanks for endorsing it, Sean. I appreciate it.
Yeah, the one. Well, just going back to the one you did with Bischoff was great. I mean, it was fantastic. I heard every bit of that. The one with The Rock back in the day, you said that nobody heard for a long time, and if you're VIP, you can listen to it. It was a lot of fun just back then when he was still wrestling back then. In the heat of his run. I mean, it was like, wow, this is really cool to kind of hear what he's thinking at the time. But no, everybody in the chat, it's just fun talking wrestling with you guys, and I might hopefully be able to get on with you Monday because I'll actually be able to maybe get off early Monday, so that'd be a lot of fun.
Sweet.
So hopefully it can happen. Appreciate you guys.
Thanks, Sean. Appreciate it. Here's a quote that's in the summary of the Scott Hall Torch Talk, 43 minutes that we put up earlier today. I'd fight Goldberg in a shoot fight 8 weeks from now because he's like, give me 2 months to train at least. In a UFC or K1 fight, I'm not impressed at all by him. And then he says, I'll pull his effing eye out. I mean, that's just a little sample of it. I mean, and he explained why he didn't like Goldberg. Like Goldberg's whining about him being too stiff with him in the ring. And it's like, dude, it's Scott, just the way he says things. And there's real insight. And I stand by this. And I've talked about it too. He discussed Sting complimenting him for knowing how to make a babyface. And I talk about that a lot. Like, the number one job of a heel, Brandon, is not to get yourself over. And that's not to do what MVP did a couple weeks back and get people cheering you because you're mentioning the sports heroes of the town you're in. Like, I mean, and I went on kind of a rant a couple weeks ago on the Dynamite Post show, but like, sometimes I watch wrestling and I'm like, and this sounds arrogant in context or out of context, but there are a lot of wrestlers on national TV who don't have the first clue about being a money drawing wrestler in this business. I'm sorry. It just is true. And there's too many wrestlers who I know and respect who echo that. And there's wrestlers I know and respect who I think could learn a lot from Scott Hall too in this Torch Talk. Sting told Scott, thanks. And then Scott went into this whole thing about, like, there's a lot of things people criticize him, the NWO for, and burying people and all that. And the defense of that crew was, is there someone they buried who didn't have it coming or didn't have flaws that they were, ignoring or arrogant about and they need to be put in their place? I mean, I think Nash and Hall and Michaels and Levesque and Waltman would defend their burial of people and go, yeah, well, when were we ever wrong? They probably were a few times, but I think they would lead with that. But the job of a heel, Brandon, is to get the babyface opponent over and cheered. Like, that is job one. I know they think, no, it's to get hearts and likes on social media and people buzzing about, oh my God, he just said that, like MJF's whole career, like, oh, what are they saying about the bomb that I dropped that people can't believe I said? No, your job as heels to get the babyface that you're wrestling over. That's it. It's why point guard, yeah, you can shoot 3-point shots, but your job is to get the ball to the power forward in the center so they can score too. You got to be a distributor. And a lot of people don't get that at all. It doesn't even cross their mind to not be thinking only about themselves. So the Scott Hall Torch Talk just dropping wisdom and a great story, and I mean, just Scott Hallisms throughout. So anyway, but the thing about heels, what do you think about that, Brandon?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that it's a bit of a lost art, and I think there's a lot of people in WWE who could probably benefit from it. I mean, like somebody like Kevin Owens, I don't think is one of those guys. I think he has a pretty good understanding of what he is there to do in his given role. But there are a lot of those examples that you cite in the other company that we talk a lot about.
Yes. BJF in the chat in response says, I'll have to listen to the Scott Hall interview this weekend. Standard Deviation said, Scott Hall's comments are applicable to a lot of issues today. Honestly, I think Tony Khan should listen to the whole Scott Hall interview. Because it's not just star ratings in your little like echo chamber bubble of super fans who have on the tip of their tongue the top 40 Tokyo Dome matches ever. Like, I mean, you got to play to a larger audience than that. Ken Arnold says Scott Hall unfiltered when the Torch Talk was wild. Tons of inappropriate language. I don't know if inappropriate's a word, but unfiltered, yeah. But maybe some of it's inappropriate. But he's expressing how he feels, and that's what made it great. I love the Kevin Nash one too, and Sean Waltman is always a blast. Yeah, those three, some of the best insight. Learned so much from them over the years, on record and off record. And these Torch Talks and the interviews I've done on my podcasts have been some of the best stuff. But yeah, I can't rank my favorite interview subjects because Bob Holly was like this huge pleasant surprise. Paul Bearer was a huge pleasant surprise. There's so many great interview subjects over the years, but Hall, Nash, and Waltman have been very consistently excellent and full of insight.
I mean, I would throw out even a more recent one. I mean, not so recent anymore, but the Jon Moxley one. I mean, they're for a guy who does so few interviews. I mean, to have him in long form was really, really cool. I
felt like honored and respected that he did 2 interviews. He did a colleague interview with Jericho. And then I followed up with, multi-hour interview. I think, did we do 2 sessions on that? Or did we, I can't remember if we did 2 sessions like with Hall or just a marathon one, but I think it was 2 sessions. But it's always a compliment when a wrestler who doesn't do interviews, that Austin interview with Moxley was awkward. And yeah, I mean, Moxley had a lot more to say than he got out on the Jericho show. And I think my approach to asking the questions was different than a colleague like Jericho doing it too. And we learned a lot, and Moxley is just so hungry he loves his business, and he's just so hungry to do things a certain way that he thinks will help. And that's manifested with this latest incarnation of his character. But I would say a heel's job is to get the babyface over, and there's not a lot of that going on in AEW anywhere with the approach that they're taking. All right. We're talking SmackDown. Sean says, yeah, the Moxley one was good. And BJF says, yeah, the Bob Holly one was good. All right. Let's see. Okay. Let me just ask you, Brandon, we're deep into the show. Is there anything else from SmackDown in particular that you want to, talk a little bit about that we haven't gotten to yet?
And we covered Rhodes and Owens, the U.S. title tournament, tag situation. No, I mean, let's talk
about the Jimmy Uso promo up front, because this I'm watching. I'm like, what's going on here? Like, I remember Todd Martin years ago saying, you know what, it's okay, AEW, if you just have a match with 2 wrestlers or 2 teams, and you wrestle, and somebody wins, and you move on. That's okay to do. Not every match needs to be an angle And I think they do that a little bit more now, or, have some content. It's like, sometimes it's just okay to have a match. And I was like, is this one of those weeks where, for whatever reason, they don't have a lot of people and around, big stars, so just going to have Jimmy, give him 8 minutes to, give or take, to, show that he can cut a promo and bond with the fans a little bit. Ron Cousin has a little laugh when they're chanting yeet at him and all that. And then he's like saying, yeah, nobody else is around. It's just me. And I was like, oh, he's kind of patting himself on the back. And then I'm like, oh, wait a second. It's just him. Those are ominous words when a babyface says, I got no friends here tonight, and advertises that. And then, sure enough, he gets attacked. How do you think Jimmy did? And what do you think of that format? Because it would have been something else if Jimmy was like, thanks, everybody, and bye, and like no angle. But every once in a while, I'd like that to happen, but it didn't happen here.
It was a little strange. I thought that it was especially odd leading with your babyface coming out and saying, "Hey, nobody's here tonight. I'm the only one, and I am the least popular Uso. Still pretty popular, but the least popular one."
Yep.
Yeah, that was a little strange. But I thought he did fine. I mean, he did fine with the content. I thought, it was good ad-libbing off the audience when they were chanting yeet at him, like you said. It wasn't anything spectacular, but I don't know what you could have really asked for him to give more than what he did. I mean, there wasn't any content there.
But it was good. You know what I like?
Yeah.
I mean, he's not known to be able to just like stand in the ring and carry a segment. It's not, it's not everybody's strength. And that's why, Nakamura is doing the vignettes and the machine guns aren't sent to the ring to try to hold the audience's attention for 8 minutes. They get a post-produced segment. I think it's smart that they do that. But I was actually kind of impressed with Jimmy seeming sort of comfortable and the moment not being too big for him. And, Sadler Version 3 says, I think Jimmy's better with the in-ring promo setting than Jay. Yeah, I mean, Jay is another guy. His going through the crowd entrance, and then he gets to the ring, and then it's like, kind of runs out of steam quickly. So yeah, in its own merits, sometimes it's fun to just, it's kind of like, Adam Cole. I hate the line now because it's but Adam Cole going, it's story time. It's like, it's so, it feels so played out, so part of like another era, and it wasn't really introduced here, and the crowd doesn't really care anymore. Time to retire, but it sort of was just story time with Jimmy. Like, hey, let's just talk about how things have been going. Let's have a little campfire discussion here, since we have a minute. But it's WWE, so there's some purpose to it. And then boom, Drew McIntyre blindsides him. So,
yeah. I mean, I think that it's good. It was good for them to establish clearly that they have plans for him as a singles wrestler going forward. That there's going to be something for Jimmy Uso outside of the Usos tag team, because when he and Jay split and Jay moved over to Raw, most of that time he was either still in Roman's shadow or injured. So this was really the first opportunity where Jimmy is officially on his own. He's a babyface. He's still not fully reunited with Jay. I mean, they're on good terms, but they're on separate brands right now.
Yeah.
Where he is able to declare a mission statement. I mean, this is really the first opportunity he's had to do that. And I thought, for what it was fine. And it made perfect sense that Drew McIntyre, who is on this mission to take out people who are friendly with Roman Reigns, that he would come and lay the attack.
Okay, a couple chat room comments here. Derek says, have you noticed the IC title? All the performers are there. Oh, wait, that's not the one I wanted to run. We'll go back to that. Sorry. 27 Newsman says, Jay just paces back and forth during promos. A bit jarring to watch, but he's still 5 times more over than Jimmy, if not more. And that's what's funny. Like I said, and you said, that he had a sense of humor about it. Like, oh, that's my cousin you're chatting for. But, I'm giving you a guilt trip, but I'm laughing it off because, whatever, good for him. But yeah, he's in an interesting spot. Junaid asks, is Jimmy going into the singles division soon? He didn't say a ton, but the ending with Drew and the latter transfer talk with Drew and Nick Aldis to explain his appearance was effective. Ken Arnold says Jimmy was more by the numbers with his promo, but he seemed much more relaxed. Yeah, it was kind of relaxing, just like story time. It did have a more organic feel than in the past. Sadler Version 3 agrees with me. I hate that Adam Cole line. Everything about Adam Cole just feels like, we talk about Bayley. If she was still doing the same thing, like it'd be time to freshen up. I mean, Cole just needs some new inspiration because everything just feels derivative and tired. And not that he needs to be beat up on more. It's been a bad couple years for him for all kinds of reasons. So to Drew, though, Ryan Solorio. Hi, Ryan. Says, do you think Drew will cost Roman his match with Solo, seeing as Drew is targeting everyone in the OG bloodline? Brandon.
Definitely a possibility. I mean, it seems like it could very well go in that direction if they want to extend that feud. I mean, kind of like we talked about at the top of the show, I think that the direction that you take with the Roman Solo program is largely predicated on where you see Solo Sikoa slotting in going forward. If you are comfortable with shifting the focus toward Jacob Fatu, and he's going to step into that role to be like the big baddie for Roman Reigns, then I think that the best course of action here is to just have Roman beat Solo clean. But if Solo is going to remain in that tribal chief role, if he's going to lead the heel side of the bloodline and continue to feud with Roman, then I think they find another way out, and one of those ways out would be a Drew McIntyre interference. You're muted.
BGF says, I hope we don't get a full Uso reunion for a few years. I like the idea that they're both faces on different shows, but help each other out now and again. Yeah, I mean, I'd like to see Jimmy in a, LA Knight kind of level role when the Bloodline thing is over. I mean, you're always got the Bloodline is such a big story arc that just is always kind of there, even if it's almost in a holding pattern. You can always get called back to it, and I think people have that feeling. But it's fine if Jimmy ends up doing something else. I mean, Jimmy is going to end up okay, but not anywhere. I don't think he's going to be as big as he was during the peak Bloodline, storyline. I mean, that's fine. But when the Usos eventually, as long as they keep them apart for a while, when they come back together again, if there's new tag teams or the Machine Guns are still around or DIY is heels against the Usos, I mean, there's some interesting things happening in the tag division now. That what you want, it's kind of like what we say with Bayley. Like, Bayley is going to get interesting again when she has fresh opponents coming in for her to play off of in a new way, not just going back to the old greatest hits. And I think that's going to be the key for Jimmy, too. The next phase for him, besides floating in and out of whatever's going on with Roman and the Bloodline members and Sammy, something new eventually will be Jimmy and Jay together against some of these new tag teams. Or, I don't know, we can call the Machine Guns new tag teams, but you know what I mean. Fresh tag teams for them to face.
Yeah, the last thing that you want is to put the Usos back together because there's nothing else for them to do, and because they're comfortable as a tag team. You want the reunion of the Usos to be because the tag division has been elevated and they can assist in further elevating it. Because right now, Jay especially feels above the tag division. But I would like WWE to get the tag division back to where it was, say, at the start of 2023 when it headlined WrestleMania. And if you can get it there, then it makes a lot more sense for the Usos to jump back in.
Yes, absolutely. Ken Arnold says Jimmy might be the super utility player that can move up and down the card. Yep, that's good. So BJF says we have to have at least one Wade accidentally muted moment per show. One would be great. I mean, I don't know if I've ever just done it once. We got to have two or three. And then BJF adds, yeah, I've done that at work. The muted trick often works in meetings. But then Brock Benningfield said, right as I was thinking it, it's just like LA Knight slipping on the ropes, LOL. The obligatory slip rope spot, the obligatory Wade is muted and doesn't see it moment. All right, Junaid says either Roman pin Solo clean at the Raw Netflix, or Drew or a new Bloodline member cost Roman the match, and Roman Solo rematch at WrestleMania. They may want a longer chase for the Ulafala. I don't know. I mean, a new member could debut. I just don't think. When I say I don't know to Roman Solo as WrestleMania worthy, I don't know, Brandon. I mean, if they wrestle in January and they want us to care about it all the way to April, and it's Solo, all due respect, he's fine in this role, with a little bit of wiggle room up and down from fine. But I think people are going to want Roman against something more than that. The Ulafala, and it just isn't there. I think it's got to be Jacob Fatu or Cody or Rock or something like that. Or maybe Drew, gets super heated up. And we get a rematch from the Survivor Series a few years ago. And the Castle show. So yeah, Brandon, your thoughts?
Yeah, I was just going to mention that there's the Rock in play here too. I mean, we can't discount the idea that he could possibly show up at the Raw Netflix debut. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. First night on Netflix. Rock has a partnership with Netflix. They're in LA. The table's just kind of set for him to be there.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. Let's go to Chris Johnson's email. He says, everybody go VIP. He goes, not much to comment on until the Roman promo. I guess we're just going full cinematic promos all the time now. It's too much for me starting tonight. So we were talking about the Punk Heyman Roman summit. I wasn't at least talking much about what they did tonight with Roman and Heyman kind of blurry in the background and the music. I didn't mind this as much. I didn't mind it at all. I didn't love it, but I liked it. I mean, I don't know. I'm trying to find the right way to frame it because I didn't have super strong feelings either way is the way to put it. Heyman smiling in the background as Roman talked. I mean, I don't think we're going to get what we were hoping for, which is the loose end of the ghosting and, the number being changed. It's just sort of, I don't think they've covered that. And I don't know if it's baked in or we're just supposed to see that as it was never important. And Wade, you're making too much of it. And all the people in the chat and the callers and the co-hosts were making too much of it. But it feels like a big deal when, Roman ghosts Heyman and then Heyman or Roman Heyman changes his number. And now they're just hanging out together and Jeremy Borish, whoever's post-producing and adding music to everything they do. So yeah, I don't have strong feelings on it. That's why it's taken this long to get to it. But what do you think of the production of it and the content in it?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was fine. Like we kind of alluded to earlier, it feels a little out of context for what WWE produces. The heavy, laying the music on so heavy and everything. But I've gotten used to them doing these segments. I mean, I would prefer something a little bit more straightforward, but it's not something that I feel the need to be like super nitpicky about. I thought the content was good enough. I mean, they laid out the challenge; it made sense for Netflix and everything. So yeah, I mean, fine, but nothing that I got excited about or would spend a ton of time complaining over.
I'm glad Chris brought this up, and it's tied into this. He writes, it still bothers me that it was never explained how Solo got the necklace. Did he steal it from Roman's house? When Heyman first saw Solo with the necklace, he asked, how did you get it? What do you think, Brandon, about that comment from Chris in the email?
Yeah, I hadn't thought of it, but it's true.
Yeah, because as Roman was saying, I want it back and all, and I was given it, and it was official. It's like, Can you remind us or fill us in on how Solo ended up with it? And all right. I like the way this is still Chris's email. I like the way they're reorganizing the rosters. It's better than the draft, in my opinion. I still like the draft. I don't think they should do. I don't know. I mean, do you think the transfer window? I want to wait and see before I have an opinion on this, to be honest. But the transfer window works when you're just kind of not shying away from the fact that we want a fresh lay of the land for the Netflix era. And they're not really running from that. The Braun Strowman, by the way, being Carmelo's opponent, we talked about the Carmelo side of it. They're making a big deal. Oh, this is a good get for SmackDown. And I'm like, that's the short version of saying Braun is someone we're moving to SmackDown to create the perception that when SmackDown loses actual top stars, SmackDown actually gained big, and we're still keeping things equal. They're not. This is back to the pre-Fox SmackDown era when the rosters were equal, but not really. And that's what it felt propaganda-esque to me tonight, Brandon.
Yeah, Strowman feels like a guy that they just kind of move when the time is right because he's run out of opponents to work with on the other brand, and there's only so much you can do with that character. I've long been a proponent of Strowman being more of a special attraction. I mean, I know that they do significantly less house shows nowadays, but to me, he makes more sense as a guy that you feature on TV for a month or so. You rotate him in and out, and then you feature him on the live events because his size and some of the offense that he has lends itself well to that setting. I just don't think that there's much upward mobility or really any compelling programs for him on the main roster at this point. I think they've burned through them all. So I think what you got tonight is largely what you get with Strowman. I mean, to me, the first time he was interesting in a very long time was that program with Bronson Reed. And that was a lot of fun, but there aren't many Bronson Reeds out there. You can't do that program over and over again. So everyone else sort of falls into this Carmelo Hayes category where they're, barely getting any offense in and Braun just wins or gets disqualified or whatever. So yeah, not a big get for SmackDown, even if they want to sell it that way. I think that as far as the draft goes, I have long been a pretty big critic of the formatting that they have used for the draft. It seems very, very convoluted and fake to me. I really dislike, the board deciding on, drafting wrestler A here and wrestler B there. And sometimes they want tag teams, but sometimes they don't. So they just split them up, and it doesn't actually make any sense. Same thing with factions. Like, if creative wants to split a faction but doesn't want to actually write an angle for it, well, then just draft half of them to the other brand. That stuff drives me crazy. It's just lazy cop-out booking. And I mean, the last draft, Triple H did a better job of it overall, but it still suffered from all the shortcomings, I think, of inherently what are problems with a draft in a pro wrestling format. It just feels scripted and it just doesn't work well. So I'm all for a method that avoids that. So this transfer window is fine by me. We'll see some of the negotiations between Aldis and Adam Pearce. Maybe we won't, but I wouldn't mind them doing some of that stuff. But I think it makes more sense in the context of a pro wrestling show.
So the drafts have been horrible. They've been run by people who, it's like they'd never seen a draft. They just thought of what a draft lottery might be. And then we got the boop, 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 boop things like an old, 80s game show where you push a button and random thing. I mean, it was so dumb. And then you had the cartoonish Fox draft with executives overacting in a corny way that was just so condescending. It was more patronizing, just like, hey, we're going to appeal to these fans by hamming it up like we think, like Jon Stewart did when he was on WWE TV. So it's been poorly done, but they are positioned now. I don't want them to drop the draft now, and they'll have one after WrestleMania. I mean, they're not giving up on the draft. This isn't a replacement for it. This is just a window, a transition window to rearrange things for the new year. And if they do it every year, that's fine. If they don't, I don't think they have to be committed to it. But they're positioned for the draft because they actually have GMs closely tied to each brand. They're ex-wrestlers who are not like, Kurt Angle, Mick Foley, Ric Flair celebrity like GMs. They're just like, like a lot of NFL coaches. They weren't stars, or NBA coaches. They weren't stars, but they understood the game and they're passionate about it. And so I like it. They're set up for like an honest draft where, I say this about AEW and the Continental Classic, and I went off on it this week. I think the fans want, I don't think I'm the only one who wants to be able to explain what the structure is. What are the rules? What are the parameters of how a draft works? And, like this, like Tony Schiavone's like, oh, this Dynamite Diamond Battle Royal Dynamite Diamond Dozen, what do they call it? Is so prestigious. And this Continental Classic, everybody wants to be in it. Well, why is everybody not in it? Why is Commander, why was Juice in it, but not like 8 other guys
why are the only 2 relevant guys? Why are there only 2 relevant guys in it that are going to be the final 2? Like, there's no question.
Yeah, the Battle Royal and the Continental Classic, you can whittle both down. The Battle Royal down to just Colin O'Reilly. I mean, what? Archer's going to finally win a match? Brian Cage going to finally win a match? Come on. Evil Uno making his every other month appearance. And the Continental Classic, I mean, it's down to, there's Darby and Ospreay and Fletcher and Okada, and it's like you got to really stretch to make a case for much else. So, and real top star. So I talked in depth with Rich about, what I think they could do different with that in this week's Everything with Rich and Wade, which, by the way, is a free sample on our Apple, on our charcoal colored feed, the PWTorch VIP feed. So search PWTorch in your podcast app. the Daily Cast logo pops up. Subscribe to that. It's free, but also the charcoal colored VIP one where we give free samples away. And this week's Everything with Rich and Wade was a free sample. And that's free for everybody. But if you do it on your iPhone Apple Podcast app, you can upgrade to a free trial VIP membership through your Apple account. So check that out. We haven't done in Everything free for everybody in a while through that format. So the transfer window, this is all leading to me wishing they would explain it a little bit more, Brandon.
Just like the draft. I mean,
yeah, Todd talked about it on the flagship and this week. Do the wrestlers have agency in this, or is it ultimately up to the GMs? Or like do both sign off on it? Is it a wrestler and GM have to sign off on it, or do the wrestlers have to convince the GM? Or because sometimes it sounds like, oh, maybe we'd be more appreciated over on the other show, like a threat, but then it sort of comes across like the GM goes, well, I'll sign off on that. So yeah, just think this stuff through and tell us. We can handle it. We're wrestling fans. Like, give us structure and explanation, Brandon.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same as the issue. Like I like it a little bit better than the draft, just because within the context of the show, it makes more sense with what they have done historically with the draft in the past. But it's the stuff that irked me the most with the draft, like especially these last couple of years, where they arbitrarily split the roster between Raw and SmackDown draft eligible wrestlers so that they have big draft picks on both Raw and SmackDown that week, even though it doesn't make any sense. Why is wrestler A available on Monday, and then wrestler B is only available on Friday? Like, shouldn't it just be the best wrestlers get drafted first? And then you have like the ridiculous decisions where, for example, I get, Carmelo Hayes, #1 overall draft pick on SmackDown. You see something in him, but is a logical general manager or a logical board really going to select a Carmelo Hayes over a champion who is available at the time? Like, none of it made any sense. So if they're going to do drafts in the future, I just wish that it would be cut and dry, handled like a sports draft, just straight up. These are the wrestlers. I mean, even split, like do a male draft and a female draft.
Yeah.
Because that part also doesn't make sense. You want to send the message that your women talent are equal, so you'll end up having the women's world champion drafted over the world champion or something like that. Just separate the two. It's so much easier, and it saves you that conundrum. And then, set specific guidelines for your champions and then go down the line and alternate. It shouldn't be like Raw gets 3 picks and SmackDown gets 2. Just let Raw have a supplemental draft at the end if they need more wrestlers. Like, it just, if you want to send the message that the shows are equal, they can't have uneven numbers drafting round per round.
It just, in everything you're saying, almost sounds like it's more, you don't mean it to be, but anytime we talk about it, it sounds like it's more complicated than it really is. Like, it's super simple, but there's politics. And when you do a draft and you do it in order, working top down, as a booker, as a promoter, you're showing your hand about how you feel about all these wrestlers. And so if you have all the women drafted separately and you take Bianca and then Rhea, then Charlotte's like, what? I mean, it's just an example. Like, yeah, you can pick anybody out. Not that Charlotte would be the one to complain, but, she might. I mean, or,
right.
You take Roman and then, he's first, and then you take Cody, and then you take Drew, and then you take Breaker. And now think about every other top guy going, wait, you took Breaker before me? You took Drew before me? So part of why they don't like doing the draft in the most logical way possible is it just shows their hand of what their perceived depth chart is. But there's plenty of ways you can work around that, with the GM having a favorite or the GM having a need. And if you think it through, no wrestler should be upset unless they're delusional about their place. And you can tell a story. Braun Strowman gets drafted 8th, and he's like, I'm going to prove I should have been a top 3 pick. Well, now you got a storyline for whoever, pick any guy who's, you can turn them into storylines. So they leave. It's same thing with Continental Classic of the formatting. They leave so much behind because they're not putting the thought into how to present it in a way that feels difficult, but it really isn't. It's just tons of opportunities if you do it right. And yeah, I mean, the worst was when it was a lottery where it's like, they didn't explain it, but it's like they all draft. It's like the The draft was done off camera, and now we've aligned everyone with a brand, but now we're pushing a randomized button to reveal it as we go. I don't want to anyway.
And by the way, after they're drafted, they go back in the pool. They're eligible again.
What?
They had to do that because of John Cena, because they drafted him to SmackDown and then back to Raw.
Oh God, yes. Oh my God, that's right. No, geez, it's been worse than I remember. With you bringing that up. Yeah. Okay, Chris says, I like the way they are reorganizing the rosters. It's better than the draft. Okay. Hey, look, it's Grayson Waller and Austin Theory. The comedy mid-card is now fully staffed once again. And parentheses, Chris said, I'm with you, Wade, on Austin Theory. I thought it'd be a top of the company star. Still not ruling it out, but I mean, I'm less confident with how they're portraying him. I don't know. I mean, like I said it with Carmelo earlier. No matter what happens, if you got the talent and they like you, and if you're presented away, the fans will buy into it. What do you think about have you thought about Austin Theory, and where are you on him now?
I don't think about him a lot.
Yep.
I think that pairing him with Grayson Waller was, I mean, maybe not a permanent death sentence, but at least a temporary death sentence, because I think we've talked about this on the show before. I think Grayson Waller does almost everything that Austin Theory does, but like a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
So it sort of eliminates the need for Austin Theory. So I don't know. I mean, maybe there's something for him down the road. But if we're talking about wrestlers on SmackDown who are presented as the butt of a joke right now, and you want me to order that depth chart and do a draft there, Carmelo is number 1, Grayson Waller's 2, and Theory is 3.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, DIY turned heel. Theory's a heel. Maybe he leaves Grayson, but he just rejoins with Gargano and Candice LeRae. I don't know. That feels like he should have grown past that by this point, then going back to being kind of the trying to think how to describe him, the kind of the punchline of jokes and the lackey. We'll see. Standard Deviation said, the Theory's reaction today stood out to me. It felt like he's an afterthought to the producers and he's not taking initiative enough himself. Brock Benningfield says, Theory seems to have a lot of the tools to succeed. I wonder what the issue really is.
I feel like the lukewarm reception to his program with Cena really did some damage to him.
Well, Cena did him no favor. Cena buried him.
No, yeah,
that was shameful, I think. And I mean, how do you feel about Theory? Cena, that was punching down. That was punching down.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
but it hurt him. I mean, I don't think he's ever really recovered from that.
No. I mean, I'm hesitant to say he'd be in a much better spot now. I mean, they might have still done Grayson Waller anyway, and team up. So like, two comedy guys. To me, it felt a little redundant, and I'd rather have Waller playing off of somebody different, and Theory just, finding his own identity. But he is being overshadowed, so we'll see. All right, good for Chelsea Green. I'm a bigger fan of her each week, says Chris in the email. Chelsea's great. She's going to have good matches. Her personality's great. The chemistry with her and Piper Niven has been fantastic and a pleasant surprise. So, we're going to get more of her. That's one of the benefits of, expanded shows and expanded titles. They've got something for her to do.
There aren't many wrestlers on television right now who I think are better at communicating with their facial expressions than Chelsea Green.
Yep. And in a way that it's in this real narrow zone of campy, but not like cheesy. I don't know, like not over the top. Like she's a character, but she portrays it in a way that feels believable and not like trying too hard. Yeah. Speaking of Cena bearing Theory, Derek Mitchell said Theory hasn't been the same since Vince was infatuated with him. Standard Deviation says, do you think Cena buried him on the instructions of management, or was it all Cena? I think it was just Cena. Cena shows up and they're like, here's your segment. And Cena's like, all right, let me come up with some stuff. And people, honestly, he's gotten to be a big enough star. I'm told, like, writers don't dare go, well, do you think maybe this is counterproductive and we'll leave damage in your wake that we don't want. People are just like, oh, it's a Cena segment, and he's gracing us with his presence and kind of does his own thing. So my hunch is based on what I've heard about how Cena handles himself and is seen backstage, that he just said, oh, it's a heel and he's a goof and I get to demean him. And so I'm going to go do it. And so Ken Arnold says, that's why I'm against John Cena working with Braun Breaker. There's a chance he'd castrate the guy like he did Austin Theory. I think if Cena started doing to Braun what Cena did to Theory, I think we'd have a Daniel Puder Kurt Angle moment. I just think Breaker would just like be like, oops, sorry, Cena, I just not broke your neck, but I just knocked out a tooth, or dislocated a shoulder or something. I could totally see Braun going oopsie, and getting physical with him. Like, I think Cena would have too much. I think Cena would have to know better than to do that to him.
It just feels like, for as much creative freedom as Cena has, one, I think he probably has a read on truly where people stand in the hierarchy, and secondly, I'm sure that there is within creative sort of like a break glass and emergency situation where there would be some pushback if he really went after a guy like Braun, who clearly they're investing more than they ever did with Theory.
Yep. And Sadler Vision 3 says Braun has more alpha energy than Theory. He would not allow it. I mean, Theory's got more time in the ring than Breaker, but Breaker's got more time in the business. And Chris just says, I always find Shinsuke interesting and weird. We haven't really talked about that. The vignette with Shinsuke, I think, is working. In its desired way. It's not he's a top guy, but the desire is, let's get people to care about Shinsuke again, and let's hide his weaknesses and feature his strengths, and the captions and him being able to do his natural inflection. By the time you're done reading the captions, you don't even feel like you were reading captions, because you're seeing the words, you're hearing Shinsuke speak in his native tongue, and then the inflection projects all the personality, and he has personality, and it just gets lost when he's speaking, phonetically memorized or broken English. So I like him. I think it's, you don't want 8 guys on your show doing that, but I think you can have somebody of Shinsuke's stature and talent and aura doing captioned promos with music. It's kind of, don't overdo it, but it works. What do you think, Brandon?
Yeah, you saw this with Damage Control too, when they started allowing Io and Kairi to speak in Japanese. I think that it benefited both of them, and it's benefiting Shinsuke. I think that Shinsuke, any heel prowess or momentum that he had, or any fear that he would be able to strike into opponents, just was sort of instantly lost when he would talk in broken English or a memorized script. You could just tell it wasn't natural for him, that he wasn't comfortable with it. And so to allow him to just, do his thing in the language he's most comfortable in, I think is a net positive all around. And I think that having Nakamura slotted correctly at this stage of his career helps too. I mean, he felt a little bit like a fish out of water last year when they shoehorned him into the main event, and he felt decidedly beneath that spot for this stage of his career. Yeah. But the U.S. title, I think, is a good water level, and I expect him to be to be good in this role going forward.
Ken Arnold adds, Shinsuke Nakamura is clearly having fun with his video promos. He's really good in that setting. Makes you wonder if AEW did that with Kazuchika Okada, how different his character would be. Sean says, yeah, BJ, they're doing that more now. Makes Shinsuke feel a little different. On the Cena front, Sean says, and this is a super chat. He goes, well, first he started by saying, I'm very worried about this last Cena run. I always liked Cena for the most part, but honestly, I didn't need him back anymore. I appreciate the longevity that he had, no doubt. Brock Benningfield says, during Cena's peak, I was part of the Cena Sucks chant crowd, but now mucho respect. And this is about Derek Mitchell says, Braun Breaker tried to punk out John Cena and The Undertaker, October 17th, 2023 edition of NXT. Braun would be fine while Theory was destroyed by Stone Cold The Rock and John Cena. BJF, going back to the other topic, so glad WWE is not letting people speak in their own language. Shinsuke and Damage Control promos with subtitles have been great. Standard Deviation says captions and music should be used for baby faces too. Otherwise, I take it as an attempt to tap into xenophobia. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know that I mean, I'm fine with them using it for baby faces too, but I don't know if it taps into xenophobia. I get why Standard Deviation is saying that, but if it's only for heels, it's like, boo them because they don't speak English. But I don't get the sense that's where WWE's heart lies, and I don't think that'd be the interpretation. Brandon, is that a concern?
Yeah, I don't think it's the intent, but I do think that it's important that, if you have babyface characters that natively speak another language, you allow them to do that as well, which I think I don't remember. Have Damage Control done any of those promos since turning babyface or since just becoming babyface?
Good question. I don't know. I don't have the timeline, fresh in my head. Yeah.
It doesn't help that they never really turned either. So
I know that's the thing. That's why it's hazy, because it's like, well, at what point, when did one thing end and one thing begin? Brendan, thanks. Great conversation. Yeah. Everybody check out my written report on SmackDown at PWTorch.com. Thanks to the chat for chiming in. Don't forget, search Wade Keller and PWTorch. Subscribe to all 4 of our free shows. 2 of them when you search Wade Keller, red and blue logo. And when you search PWTorch, the colorful Daily Cast logo, different show each day of the week. Shows dedicated to WWE, NXT, AEW, and more. The 90s Past Cast is a blast. Coast to Coast is great. I'm leaving somebody off on purpose because I hate I'm moving on. Also, when you search PWTorch, the charcoal color logo pops up. That has some free VIP samples. And on the Apple Podcast app, you can go to free trial and upgrade to unlock all the VIP shows and the ad-free versions of these shows. And as I'm told to say more often and don't, please like this show, comment below, and subscribe to our channel. Spread the word wherever you talk wrestling. Let people know if you like this show and our approach to covering wrestling, why it's different, why you like it, and why they should subscribe. And yes, go VIP. However you do it, pwtorch.com/govip. Sean says I missed one of his super chats. I thought I put it on the screen and gave him credit, but I was going to give a final thank you to our super chatters, which was Sean. He did add this. Yes, he said the interviews you did with creative people were always fun. A lot of good insight from different people, and I missed those. We actually on the VIP side have a section that just has links to all of or almost all of them. I think it's pretty close to fully updated. All the ex-creative team members, just amazing behind-the-scenes stories on storylines that were changed and anecdotes about what it was like to work behind the scenes with Vince McMahon and everybody. And that's some of my favorite conversations. And it would be fun to do more of those. Thanks also to Andrave's Gaming and CJ La Chapelle for their super chats earlier in the show. Got a good conversation on Bayley and also SmackDown being Netflix International, but not in the United States, and the whole diversity. So some good topics brought up by our super chatters that we might not have gotten to otherwise. Once again, Brandon, thanks. We'll talk to you again soon.
Sounds good. Thanks so much.
Enjoy your weekend. Thanks.